Video and photo backlogs can leave you overwhelmed, exhausted, and burnt out. We've been there, and our fears of outsourcing stopped us in the past. Can you find an editor as invested in your brand as you are? Will other photographers and filmmakers we network with look down on us for not editing everything on our own? That fear of outsourcing can be detrimental to your career. That's why we love our partnership with Weditor. Their attention to details with not only our work, but also their care for their clients through all steps of the outsourcing process lets us fully step back from editing and focus on what we love, knowing our work is receiving the attention it needs. More than just editing, Weditor is passionate about demystifying the outsourcing market. Follow Weditor on Instagram at we_r_Weditor for free educational tips, tools, and resources to guide you through the insanity of today's editing market. For an even deeper dive, follow Weditor's blog at weditor.com/outsourcing.
Welcome to the We Got You podcast, a network curated for wedding photographers and filmmakers that dives deep into the strategies and tactics to transitioning a side hustle in the wedding industry into a full-time, thriving career. We're your hosts, luxury wedding filmmaker Emma K. Films and luxury destination wedding photographer Hannah Brook Photography. It wasn't too long ago that we picked up our cameras for the first time, having absolutely no idea where it would lead us. Years later, we're traveling the globe for beautiful destination weddings, built our dream lifestyles, and run multi-six-figure careers. It didn't happen overnight and it wasn't easy, but it is attainable and so worth it. And we're ready to teach you our strategies. Covering a variety of topics from both our first-hand experiences and reputable guest speakers' insights crucial for business growth, we're exploring the art of marketing within your niche, discussing effective ways to attract and retain clients, leverage social media, and build a strong online presence, and so much more. We're not shying away from talking through the challenges of the wedding industry and offering realistic solutions to navigate them successfully. We emphasize the importance of networking, establishing meaningful relationships with clients, and continuously honing one's craft to stand out in a competitive market. This is the We Got You podcast.
Hello, We Got You podcast. Hannah and I are both stoked that you're here this morning. It's a new week, wherever you're listening from. We are so thankful that you're here. Today's episode, I'm not going to lie to you, Hannah and I didn't have a layout of what we wanted this episode to look like. And I was literally just typing on the screen. I was like, oh, okay, Hannah and I need to figure it out. And it just instantly came into my mind, hot takes. This episode is going to be nothing but our hot takes on the wedding industry, photo and video specifically. And we are stoked. This is coming genuinely just on the fly. So it's going to be super conversational. And yeah, we didn't have any prep work for this. So we're really excited to dive in. I do want to make a very, very, very important disclaimer before we start getting into this, that these are mine and Hannah's personal opinions. This is not us trying to look down on anyone. This is not us trying to hurt anyone's feelings. First and foremost, and this is going to be one of our hot takes, everyone does things differently in this industry and everyone has different opinions. And so we want to make it known that while these are mine and Hannah's personal opinions and things that we claim to be in or out for 2024, or maybe our hot takes, they're just our opinions. We would love to know if you disagree or if you agree with any of them. Start conversations in our Facebook group. Send us a message. We are more than happy to have conversation about this. But again, we want you to know this just comes from a place of fun and is not meant to at all make anyone feel bad if they film or photograph a certain way. But they are our hot takes on the wedding industry. So with that being said, I kind of think we should dive right in. And I could start honestly if you want.
Yeah, you go for it. Let's hear what your first hot take is.
Okay, so I think honestly, we'll do one that is video specific for a second. And I think that is probably the biggest hot takes in the industry right now is handheld versus gimbal. I've seen a lot in Facebook groups where people are like, handheld is the way and shame on a gimbal. And then the gimbal users are like, shame on the handheld, gimbal all the way. And I think that this is a really interesting take because honestly, I don't think it should be one way or the other. I think it all comes down to how you film. There really isn't a right or a wrong. When I first started wedding video, the first few months I used a gimbal. And for any of the photographers that are out there, gimbals are these is a stabilizer for your camera. But I started using gimbal for like the first few months. Then I was like, no, like I don't really want to use it. And I honestly went over to handheld. For years, I shot handheld. And it wasn't honestly until it would have been like the end of, it wasn't until about like halfway through 2022 where I started getting back on a gimbal and I started using it more and more. But honestly, I went so back and forth on it solely because I was like reading in Facebook groups of people like hating on a gimbal or people hating on handheld. And like, I had no idea like what direction I was supposed to take with this. Now I film almost 100% on a gimbal. I do obviously film like some things on the wedding day handheld. But my hot take is like, I think that in these Facebook groups, we can have a lot of influence on what people think that they should and shouldn't do. And we can get really opinionated on it. Honestly, for me, my opinion, I think it's really all about the way that you film. And if you're filming something, you know, that you want this more like, I'm right there with you, like on this hike, or I'm running with the couple and I'm right here with them. Like, yeah, probably the handheld approach is going to fit a little bit better to like that, the vision that you have in your head. Whereas like, hey, yeah, if you want to capture the reception, all the gorgeous details and have like this really clean, sleek look, then gimbal probably is going to fit that better. But I think we get really intense in the Facebook groups about gimbal versus handheld. And I don't think it should be that way. I think at the end of the day, like there is not a right and wrong, and you have to decide like what works best for you. So that's my hot take number 1 for video.
It's so funny because I feel like there's like opinions that people are like, I would die on a sword for this. Like, this is what I truly believe. And typically it's whichever one they do. But then the second people like learn and are educated in the other one, they're like, okay, so like maybe it's not that bad. All right. And like that's why I feel like with Canon and Nikon, there's always been like a what's the best way to non-verbal war? Like where it's just like, you just know, like if you have Nikon, you're better. If you have Canon, you just know you're better. But it's just what people started on. Like, you are a Nikon probably because you started on a Nikon. You're a Canon probably because you just started on a Canon. Like you didn't know that you were entering this like crazy war when you started. But then like now Sony's entered the chat. And so now it's just like, now it's Canon versus Nikon versus Sony. And it's just so funny to me because I think we can all agree it really like, yes, there's perks between different cameras. And I'm going to say this and someone's going to be like, no, there is a difference. But like, it doesn't really make that big of a difference when you're shooting a wedding day. If you have the right lenses or if you're working it, like, you know, your settings and you know your camera like the back of your hand, it really doesn't matter which one you're using. It's personal preference. So it cracks me up that it's just like, it's this like non-spoken like war where it's like, what do you shoot with? Okay. You know, where it's just like, you have to like have a certain one.
No, I so feel that. Okay, and can we talk about like the gear know-it-alls out there? Like there's so many times where like I'm in person with people maybe at an event or at a wedding, and like it's just someone being like, what do you shoot on? And you tell them and they're just like, oh, or they like want to know like all the specs of what you're shooting on. And it's like almost intimidating to me. Like I'm just like, hey man, like I shoot on what I shoot on. I'm confident in it. Like like leave me alone, you know? But like I feel like there are a lot of people out there that it's like they get so hardcore on like the gear aspect of film or photography, and it comes off just almost like a little condescending. I'm not gonna lie, I don't like it.
Yeah, almost like, what are you compensating for? Like, why do you have to like pick apart and like ask me these sensors and this and this and this, and until I answer, I don't know, and then you're like, got her. You know, I'm like, yeah. You did.
you got me. Another one that I feel like I'm thinking of is, and this is like an out for 2024. Flat lays are out. In my opinion, I gotta say it. I'm gonna keep saying it throughout this episode. I haven't liked flat lays, honestly. Like I wasn't a fan of them last year in 2023, and I'm still not a fan of them this year. I just feel like, man, and I'm really curious to see how many people disagree like this with me on this, but I feel like flat lays are boring. Like I'm bored. I look at it and I'm like, what is this? Okay, cool. Like you captured everything in one photo, but like, what does it mean? And I've been like learning over the past year to like really like focus, like still focus on the details, but like have them be like small elements, right? Like maybe just the shoes, or maybe just the jewelry, or maybe just this, but like I'm just not drawn to flat lays anymore. And I think it's something that's so ingrained in the tradition of wedding film and wedding photography that it's like, you have to get the flat lay and you have to throw everything all at one, and it means nothing to me. I don't know. What are your
You know
thoughts?
what though? It's funny because when you first said this, when we were like thinking of, oh, what do we want to talk about this on this episode? You're like, okay, I'm curious to like know if you agree. And it's crazy because I definitely agree. And here's why. And definitely in my opinion, that's going to be like what we just keep saying to justify.
We're not
Okay,
very
guys,
good
don't
about
come-
talking about
don't
our
come fight me.
controversial opinions.
We're not good about talking about our feelings, okay? But like genuinely what I think is like the more luxury weddings that I see or that, you know, I'm like
Mhm.
stepping into or that I shoot, the less curated they are. They're so much more documentary style. High-end weddings,
Yeah.
documentary style, you know, luxury weddings, documentary style. Whereas if you're shooting a $2,000 barn wedding, it's going to be a lot more curated and posed because you don't necessarily have that experience and, you know, delivery that you would in a luxury wedding. Like they're very different, which makes sense where, you know, luxury weddings are going to have a more like authentic, you know, like, oh, the shoes are like she took off her shoes and you're shooting the shoes on the ground or like grabbing her perfume and like getting those kind of details versus the flat lay laid out. Whereas I feel like that is a more what is not high end and not luxury. Like it's more like
Yeah. No,
what is the
like
word for it?
it's just like
Like
unspoken, just like high end.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
where
know.
it's just like I feel like eventually weddings start to transition out of it because
Yeah.
it is curating a piece of the wedding day, and eventually
Mhm.
the more luxury you go, the less curation there is. So I think that's just one of
Yeah.
the things that just naturally fades out. So I mean, I think if you're still doing flat lays, like I honestly, there's some flat lays I absolutely adore. I just don't share many
Yeah.
anymore just because I feel like the more weddings I'm transitioning into just don't have them and you know have the same value to them. But I had a flat lay at my wedding. I absolutely love flat lays. And I think really that is like a bride's personal opinion and perspective of what
Right.
she wants on her wedding day. But I totally see what you're saying, where it's like the like different weddings, it is something that is more curated, and some weddings just don't want any curation.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's an interesting take, I think, to think about because, yeah, it's just been something that everyone's been doing for so long that it's like,
Yeah.
oh, not
It's
to
like
do a flat
ingrained
lay?
since we
Like,
started. Yeah.
I agree.
Um
Okay. What are your
I
thoughts?
I was gonna say, I think another hot take, and nobody burned me at the stake for this one, is blurry photos. I love a good blurry photo in a gallery, but I think that people are, instead of like getting the shot and then taking a blurry photo, they're only collecting blurry photos of certain like pieces of a shoot or a wedding day, in which case they're losing that like crisp image or film shot or whatnot without it being blurry, which makes me really sad because I do unfortunately think that the blurry images are a trend, and eventually, you know, there's a huge wave and eventually we won't be seeing them as much anymore, and that some brides and grooms might look back at their galleries like years from now and be like, yep, we were in that trend of the blurry, and maybe hope that they had some that were not blurry. I don't know.
Okay, interesting. Because no, I do feel like in a lot of like I've seen a lot of work where it almost feels like it's just blurry just to be blurry. And like there are certain images where I'm like, we're almost like losing like what was the intention? Like why did you make it blurry?
Yeah.
Like was that pose something that felt like okay, like maybe if they're just like walking in the distance, like they're walking and then you're blurring it, it gives you that like feeling that you're like moving with them. Whereas like sometimes it's just like this stagnant pose that just feels like it's blurry to be blurry. And yeah, I do feel like that because I'm like
trend. Yeah.
right, like that is like genuinely to fit the trend and not because like there was intention behind like these are why these images are blurry. So I hear you there. I definitely like agree with that in terms of like photo. And I think like trends are crazy, right? Like there's so many of them and they come in and out of the industry, and I'm sure you hear people all over social media talking about it, whether they're bashing it or supporting it. And I think at the end of the day, like trends aren't a bad thing. I just think you have to have meaning behind the trend. If you're just doing it literally just for the trend, then like, okay, well, it's probably not going to look as cool 3-5 years from now. But like, if you're doing it because like you really stand by it and you're super, super actually attracted to it, then like, I don't know, there's more meaning there. So like trends are interesting too, you know?
Well, and it was like, I remember we just chatted with Cassie Yost on the last episode, and she was talking about how like you have to be able to get on board with trends because that's what's new and occurring and happening, and brides and grooms are going to be looking for what sets you apart. And if you're current, that's something that will set you apart probably from a lot of other photographers who are, you know, refusing to get on board with certain things. So like, by all means, I love blurry photos, and I do include them in almost every single one of my galleries when I feel like it's a really good moment for it. But same thing like when Cassie was talking about film, like you have to have, like you just said, like an intention. Like she was even saying with film, like you don't just take it all the time. She's like, she's taking film photos when she feels like, okay, this is a really good shot that will like tell the story better in film, you know? So yeah, I don't know.
No, I like that.
Does your current client delivery system feel unexciting, limiting, and boring? Maybe you're still using good old Google Drive or Dropbox to deliver your clients' wedding films. If the answer to these is yes, it's time to level up your video delivery experience with VidFlow. VidFlow is a pay-per-use online platform that allows you to deliver fully branded websites for each of your clients. While being incredibly affordable, VidFlow is accessible on mobile, desktop, and smart TVs with included long-term hosting so that your clients can truly enjoy the entire experience when receiving their wedding films. When I first found VidFlow, it was such an easy switch that truly benefited my business substantially. With so many incredible features and options for customization and personalization, VidFlow continues to wow my clients time and time again. You can find VidFlow on Instagram or visit their website at vidflow.co. Use our code WGY20 for 20% off a yearly premium membership and level up your client experience today with VidFlow.
Okay, I was thinking of another one, and I'm like, honestly, the whole ego competition at the beginning of a wedding day sometimes, or even like throughout a wedding day at times. And I have heard this from many other videographers, and I am sure, Han, you can say the exact same thing for photographers as well. But it's like showing up to a wedding day, and every once in a while, there's just like that photographer, or again, like vice versa, that just like has got their ego up, man. And it's like, it's like intimidating. It doesn't make me feel very welcomed. And like, granted, like people's personalities are 100% different. So there are a billion things that could lead the individual to feeling like they kind of have to have an ego. But when people are just like throwing an ego in there at the beginning of a wedding day to throw an ego in there, it's like, why? You know, especially like as a videographer, like obviously majority of the time the couple spent more on the photographer than they did the videographer. Like we do know that. But like at the end of the day, like the couple hired both of us to get photo and video of the couple. Like it's both important to them. And so I think like coming in with that mentality of like, no, hey, like I am here for whatever you need. Like, you have any questions, ask me. I'm super flexible to work with. Like, how can I help you? And just like this warm, inviting, regardless of whether you're in a, you know, like quote unquote, like an extrovert or an introvert, like at the end of the day, like you still need to be welcoming. You still need to like have open arms in a way that is going to help benefit both you and, you know, the photographer or videographer. And so like, I definitely think that's definitely an out for 2024 is just like that ego competition between photo and video on the wedding day. That's literally not helping anyone.
No, and like honestly, I think all photographers can admit that there's just something that you get in video that you will never get in photo. And that's okay. That's why they're different. You know, that's a big purpose for it. But like you said, they hired both people. I think I unfortunately see it more and like hear stories more of like photographers who kind of have a little bit more of an ego. I'm going to swallow my pride and almost kind of throw us under a bus. But yeah, I kind of feel like there is that little like, oh, well, you were either paid more or you were picked first, you know, and a lot of people can really get in their head with that, especially if you're a little self-conscious about the wedding day. It's something that you like are going to hyper focus on. Okay, well, at least they picked me first, or they, you know, they paid me more or whatnot. And so it's something that I think a lot of people think about. But even just like throughout the wedding day, it's so not necessary. It's like, even just thinking about like, there's no reason for one shot to be better than the other. Like the videographer doesn't need a 50-minute shot of the exact aisle of the ceremony. And the photographer doesn't need to go stand in front of every single tripod that they have. You know, like there's no like passive aggressiveness that is necessary. Like it just like is crazy to me that when people are like, oh yeah, this person like really bothered me, so I stood in front of their tripod, or like, oh yeah, this photographer is bothering me, so I put a tripod in the middle of the aisle. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so not necessary. We're like not 12, but it does. I feel like it does happen. And then a lot of it is just because, you know, people might not be as confident. And yeah, I mean, we're all a team. So it's just, it's crazy to me that it still happens, but also like it's understandable because everyone gets in their heads. But the wedding day is about our couples, and we just really want to see them shine and thrive and, you know, be able to document that and make sure that their video is just as good, and vice versa, make sure that their photos are just as good.
Right. I totally agree. I completely agree with that.
I think another kind of hot take where I feel like the last couple years we've been trying to do this, but find a new app to replace Instagram. I don't understand it. I love Instagram. Instagram is like my best friend. And I feel like a couple years ago it was Clubhouse and everyone's like, we need a rally for Clubhouse and this is going to be the thing. And then like this past year it was like Threads, this is going to be the thing. And I was like, no. And I feel like Instagram has really stood the test of time, but it is just crazy to me that we just keep trying to rally and find this like new app, the new thing. And I would just really love for us to just hang out with Insta.
I completely agree, because I think anytime there is a new app or a new platform, everyone jumps on it. I specifically am so guilty of it, because it's like when Clubhouse came out, I was like, oh my gosh, Clubhouse. I'm like pouring all my time into Clubhouse and not pouring any of my time into Instagram. And then there's like, okay, well, then Threads comes out and I'm like, oh my gosh, Threads, like, yay, like I want to get on that and rally on that. And it's like, at the end, it's just interesting, I guess, like seeing a lot of these like platforms, like they rise and then they fall, right? And like, I don't know, maybe obviously there's still millions of users using Threads, but it's interesting how we just get to like, everybody's got to pour so much time on this and invest in this and like spend all your time here. And I'm like, yo, I'm barely keeping up on Instagram alone. Do you think I really need like more apps?
Right. Saying. Well, and like, it's not even to say that you shouldn't be on them. Like, you should totally be on them. Like, you should stay up with what's current, where your audience is, like, keep up to date with it. But I'm just like, like you said, only have so much energy. TikTok's staying around. So, like, trying to work with TikTok and Instagram. Facebook is still, you know, a good marketing source as well. So, like, really keeping, like, where your energy can go. And, like, I don't know. I feel like there's so many recent apps where it's like, okay, all of your energy has to go there and stuff, where it's like, okay, take a step back, especially with like apps that are new or like trends that are trending. You don't have to pour 150% into it. Dip your toes into it, you know, like really kind of start off slow and like let that grow and stuff. Even with what were we talking about earlier? Maybe it was I don't remember. It's a Monday.
I love it. You're just like, I don't know.
But like, even like when Cassie Yost was talking about like, you know, film and like getting into that, because that was something that a lot more people are interested in. It wasn't just like, let me go sell all of my camera gear and buy only film stuff. I think that's the point I'm trying to get at, is with these apps. It's not like, let me go give up my entire Instagram real estate. It is very much like, just dip your toes into it. Like, we don't need to go crazy. It's okay.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Which I think like transitions into kind of like what I was going to say next, is like, it's that very healthy balance of like understanding really like what's going to pop off and like where the trend goes. Cause obviously the day that Instagram was created, like, sure, there's like millions of people who are like, I'm never going to download Instagram and I'm Facebook only, you know? And like, there is that difference of like, no, like you want to be one step ahead of everyone else, right? Like you want to use it best to your advantage, right? Like you don't want to be like, so digital marketing is going to like leave with or without you, right? And you're either on board for it and you're like trying or you're not. But I think it is that healthy balance of like, like you said, it's like, okay, I'm going to get into film and I'm going to sell all my other camera gear just to literally get into film. Or it's like for us, like when there's new platforms out, it's like, sure, I'm going to try out Threads. Sure, I'm going to try out Clubhouse. Like, want to use it the best of my ability, but also like I only have so much time and I'm not just going to completely like ditch my old marketing strategy to get on the new one, which then brings me to kind of like that thought process that I have that I definitely like. This is a hot take. And this is very generalized. This is not directed towards any specific person at all. But I do think that the older generations have a tendency to really coaching us that there's only one way to success. I don't think it's intentional. I really don't. Because again, like as we are going through our own journeys, like for us, like we're seeing what has worked for us to succeed and what has led us to failure and like our challenges and our successes and our wins. But I think it can be really hard for the older generation seeing how relevant digital marketing has become, seeing how large social media is. There are entirely different ways to become influencers, to become creators, to enter the luxury market, or to niche out to destination elements than there was 10 years ago, right? Entering the luxury market 10 years ago was way different than entering the luxury market today. And like, granted, I will say like there are 100% things that are the same. So I'm not discrediting anyone. I just think is a very, very generalized blanket statement that they that there is an older generation kind of that just like shapes us that there's one way to success, and there's not. By all means, the way that they've learned and the way that they do things is incredible. And I've learned so much from my older generation of creators and inspirations. Like I've learned so much and will continue to learn so much. I just don't like the mentality that there's just one way. That's just the way, right? Like now, today, there are multiple ways. There are multiple perspectives, multiple opinions. Like the way that I film is different from like the other 5 videographers like across the globe. And like the way that we all got into the luxury market isn't exactly the same. And that's okay. So I don't know. I'm like, that is definitely a hot take. And again, I don't say that to pinpoint anyone at all. I don't like when anyone really is like, there's just one way that you're going to grow in this industry. It's my way or the highway.
Well, and you think about it, there was like a traditional way and then a non-traditional way. And for a long time, there really was only a traditional way, like just in general in life. And everything just evolves and evolves and evolves. And then more opportunities happen and more things are created and stuff. Where I even think like, I remember going to high school and my parents being like, okay, like what college do you want to go to? Like, you know, thinking about those next steps, because you couldn't get a job without going to college. You had to have a bachelor's degree to get any kind of job, like besides a minimum wage job. And so it's like if you want to set yourself up, you have to go to college. And then in college, you know, applying for a master's degree, because there is jobs that you cannot get unless you have a master's degree, and a master's degree will substantially set you up for the future and like will get you a higher pay raise, all of these things. Well then like, you know, the other flip side of that is the non-traditional side where it's like, okay, like you really can start off on, you know, social media, digital marketing, Instagram, TikTok, all of those things, and grow a following, create a personality, create a brand, all of these things that you don't have to go to college for, which I think to the older generation is almost like didn't even know that existed. I remember when I was in my like 2nd or 3rd year of photography and I was talking to my dad just about like logistics and back end stuff, you know, finances, everything. He was like, wow. He's like, I genuinely just like didn't even know this was a thing. He was like, if you told me back in my day that you could do this and make a living off of this and make what you make, he's like, I would never have believed you, because they just genuinely didn't even know that it existed. And so there was very much this like almost mindset of you have to do it traditionally. Nowadays, even if you have a master's, you're getting like, you're not really getting paid what you should be getting paid for it, because now so many people have bachelors, so many people have masters, you know, where we are forced to almost find out this other route where it's okay, how can we grow? How can we financially have freedom? How can we create the lifestyle that we want? Because the traditional way doesn't really work for everyone. It does work for a lot of people, you know, and I have 4 sisters and all of them have gone the traditional route. And it's really incredible to see where that journey has taken them and how well it's worked for them. I'm somebody who like could not pass high school chemistry. So like obviously wasn't going to go very far, but like creative route was definitely for me. But like, it's just very crazy where it's like, yes, it does work for some people. And I think a lot of people will take like, oh, well, it worked for this person, so like that's the way it's going to work. Even just like in the like creative industry of like, oh, well, I did it this way, so like that's the only way you can do it, because like, well, if it worked for me, it's the only way that works, when really there could be 10 different ways that works to get you to a certain point.
Right. No, 100%. And I think like everybody's journey is different. Like I even remember like when I was like releasing my course, it was very much like, this is my experience. These are all the things that I have done. You can do this differently, but I want to share with you my experience, and, you know, take it with a grain of salt, run every piece of advice I ever gave you and like run with it. But like the choice is yours. And like, there really are different ways. And it is, I think, that reality too of like, you know what, 15 years from now, we're going to be in that older generation, right? Like it's going to change. It's going to change. There are going to be people that replace you and I sitting here talking on the screen. Like, it's crazy to think about, and it's like sad. But the industry is constantly changing. And again, like as always, you can take so much from, you know, your elders, but at the same time, like you do have to be innovative and be thinking about like, okay, what is today's society doing? And like, how can I gain a competitive advantage and really give something that has such value and that's unique to today's society, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy because I feel like we could have made an entire podcast episode on that topic.
Yeah.
Because I think we've all, especially as creatives have all felt that way at some point, because being a creative is not traditional. what we are doing right now is not the traditional route in life in general, let alone then now trying to figure out your own way and guide yourself through creating this brand and job and work when it's not traditional. Like, we're all really kind of like figuring it out and working on it and building something on our own, which is, I feel like, a huge pull. Like, that's a huge reason why we are all in this position. But it is so different, and it is not a traditional journey to be on.
Yeah, no, I honestly couldn't agree more. I can't believe it's almost been like 28 minutes of us talking about literally our hot takes.
Man.
But with that, I mean, thank you for listening. I feel like we could, that was pretty good. I mean, we got a lot of our thoughts and honest opinions in there. Honestly, we don't want to put too many hot takes so that we don't get too attacked. But no, really, like, again, we say all these things as our own opinions, as our own experiences. We are not at all, not one of these hot takes is directed towards any specific person at all. So please know that. We are happy if you agree with us. We're happy if you disagree with us. We'd love to chat about it in our Facebook group. We'd love to hear any hot takes that you have about this industry that you have been feeling that you've been wanting to say. Like, please feel free to send us a message, give us your feedback. But again, all of this comes from a good place with Hannah and I. Sometimes we just want to rant about the industry. The industry is not perfect. We're not perfect. And this was our outlet to do so. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of Hot Takes in the Wedding Industry. And we will see you next week on the We Got You podcast.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the We Got You podcast. We would absolutely love it if you could take an extra minute to leave us a review and let us know what you think. DM us a screenshot of it and we'll send you a coffee on us. If you want access to an exclusive community, rad freebies, giveaways, and wedding referrals, then join our Facebook group today. Also, if you aren't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure that you're following along on Instagram at WeGotYou_podcast to stay up to date. We'll see you next week on the We Got You podcast.